All right, let's continue our talk about expressive elements. We've been through tempo, fast and slow beats, changing the speed of the piece. That's one thing we can do. Another thing that we can do that's really easy, and you can all do it, is changing the volume level of the music. So just like you can turn up the sound on your whatever device you happen to be playing your music on, there's so many these days, you can change the volume levels on the piece of music that you're performing as well. But we don't usually refer to it as volume. The technical term for that is dynamics. Dynamics. So if you hear people talk about the dynamics of the music, they're just talking about louds and softs. This is the easy stuff. And these two concepts, tempo and dynamics, are the very easiest things for you to understand because it's something you deal with every day. You turn the volume up and down on your television set. You run faster, you run slower. You can deal with those things very easily. So we just need to learn the terminology that goes with that. So there's sort of a spread for dynamic terms. So we'll start with the very softest of those terms, and that is pianissimo. Pianissimo. In Italian, if you add an issimo to something, that makes it more of whatever it already was. So pianissimo comes from piano, which is the instrument we're sitting at. We call it the piano, but the word piano in Italian means soft. So piano is soft, pianissimo is really soft. And if you looked at the music, you would see just a little italicized lowercase p to indicate piano, and two little lowercase p's would indicate pianissimo. As we get into the Romantic period and later, you might see 3 or 4 little p's. Now, how soft can we be? Really, there's a limit to how softly you can play and still make a sound. But what the composer is trying to tell us is to play that as softly, softly, softly as possible. So they really got kind of crazy in the Romantic period, sometimes telling us exactly what they wanted us to do. So that's the soft end, pianissimo to piano. Let's move to the loud end. The Italian word for loud is forte. It actually means strength. So if we talk about, what's your forte, what's your strength, it's the same word. So if you think of strength as being loud, forte, really loud, again, we put the issimo on the end, so we have fortissimo. Fortissimo on this end, pianissimo on this end. We can get more F's, and then it becomes like fortissimo and all that, but we usually just say 3 F's when we get to that point. We don't even try to say those words. So we've got the soft end, we've got the loud end. What about in the middle? There's got to be some moderate ground there. So the moderate ground that we have is the mezzo zone, I'll call it. When we talked about voices, we talked about the mezzo soprano as being the medium soprano. Mezzo is also applied here to dynamics. So we would have mezzo piano. It's louder than piano, but not as loud as forte. Mezzo forte, not as loud as forte. So what's, mezzo forte, mezzo piano? It's kind of a fine line. And much like tempo, it's perceptual. What I think is loud, what you think is loud, may not be the same thing at all. If you're a parent and you have teenagers, what they think is loud and what you think is loud is probably completely different. You're always telling them to turn the music down. So it's, again, subjective. There's not a little thing that says, okay, now you're loud enough and this is forte. Unless you've got a conductor telling you to play louder, you just do what you think is right. So those are the dynamic levels from pianissimo to fortissimo. We also have some things we can do to change the dynamics. Up until about the early 1700s, if you were playing a piece of music, you would probably be playing loud, 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 and then you would be suddenly soft. And we'll talk about that when we get to that period of time. So there really wasn't any gradual way to get there. You were loud and then you were soft. But as we get more sophisticated in our use of the instruments, we learned how to do gradually louder, gradually softer. So we have to have some way to indicate that in the music so the performer knows to do it. And the way we do that is with 2 things. One is called the crescendo mark, crescendo. Crescendo means to get louder. So on the music, the composer might just write C-R-E-S-C as an abbreviation for crescendo, but more likely what they will do is use something that looks very much like the old lesser than, greater than thing you learned in elementary school math. So it's a little arrow that looks like that. And the end of it that's smallest, just like in greater than, less than in math, is the small end. So the whatever end is closed up, that's the soft end of the of the arrow. So if we're getting louder, it would start with the small end and it would get bigger. And it might even stretch for quite a long ways on the piece of music. So that's our shorthand method of saying get louder through this passage. The opposite of that has actually two names for it. One is decrescendo, so the opposite. We'll turn our arrow around this way. We started loud, we're getting softer. Another word for that same process is diminuendo, so diminishing of the sound. They're both indicated exactly the same way on the page. They're just different terms for the same things. So we have a range of louds to softs. We can get louder, we can get softer. And basically, that's what we do with dynamics.